There's a gentle hum in the meadow. If you close your eyes, you'll hear it. Not the rustling of leaves or the distant wind, but something smaller, softer, almost shy, a rhythm in the air, a vibration that doesn't demand attention, but rewards those who listen. It's the sound of bees. And while it might seem simple, the hum of insects, busy among flowers, it's anything but. Because within that sound lies a world of communication, a language, a code that's been passed down for tens of millions of years, long before humans ever carved words into stone or spoke firelit stories into the dark. Bees, as it turns out, are not just pollinators. They are storytellers, but they don't use words. They use motion, vibration, scent, touch, sunlight, magnetism, even silence. A language built not on sound but on feeling. One that can only be fully understood if you shrink yourself down, not just in size but in mind, to see the world the way a bee sees it. Let's begin there. Let's leave our human height behind, drop below the petals, beneath the leaves, past the blades of grass, and arrive in the world of a honeybee. To her, the sky is a vast and burning map. The sun isn't just warmth, it's a compass, a clock, a guide. And each flower, not just a food source, but a message, a signal, a glowing sign of opportunity. She doesn't fly aimlessly. Every curve in the air, every flap of her wings has intention. Because she knows something most humans don't. There's a language in the air, not spoken and not sung, but danced. And this language, this secret form of communication, allows a bee to do something astonishing. Tell her sisters exactly where food is. Think about that. A creature no bigger than a paperclip, with a brain the size of a sesame seed, can remember the position of a flower miles away, fly back to the hive, and describe it in detail, using nothing but a series of tiny movements in the dark. No maps, no GPS, no words, just dance. But before we can understand that dance, we need to understand the hive. Because bees don't live in isolation. They are born into a society, a superorganism, where thousands of individuals work as one. The hive has no leader in the way we think of leadership. Yes, there is a queen, but she does not command. She lays eggs. She emits pheromones. She maintains order through presence, not instruction. The real decisions about where to forage, when to swarm, how to allocate labour, those are made collectively, through thousands of interactions, brief touches, shared scents, antennae tapping, tiny signals exchanged in the dark. It's not chaos, it's consensus, and the bee's language, the real, hidden one, flows through it all. You could call it intuition, instinct, evolution, but to the bee, it's simply life, a language as old as the flowers themselves. It begins when a forager returns. She enters the hive, dusted in pollen, heavy with nectar, and walks into the dark. There are no lights inside, no windows, just the warmth of wax and the scent of her sisters. And then she begins to move, a figure eight, a waggle in the middle, a turn, another waggle, another turn. Each movement is precise, calibrated, measured, full of meaning. This is the waggle dance, and to those who understand it, to the other bees clustering around her, it is a message far more detailed than any spoken phrase. The angle of the waggle tells them the direction of the food source, measured against the sun. The duration of the waggle tells them the distance, how far to fly, and the intensity of the dance, that tells them how rich the reward is. She doesn't say, there are lavender fields 3 kilometers to the east. She embodies it. She becomes the direction, the distance, the delight. And the others watch. They feel the vibrations. They touch her with their antennae. They memorize the motion. And then they launch. One by one, the dancers become seekers, each flying out into the world, guided only by a memory of movement in the dark. And remarkably, they find it. They land on the same patch of flowers their sister described. They collect nectar. They gather pollen. And then they return, performing their own dances, refining the message, updating the hive. It's not just communication, it's collective intelligence. Each forager acts as both scout and reporter. The hive becomes a living map, a constantly updating, dynamic understanding of the outside world, built from thousands of tiny dances. And the waggle dance is just one layer. Bees also use pheromones, chemical signals that mark danger, signal health, attract mates, or guide others. They leave scent trails to good sources, emit alarm signals when threatened, coat the queen in a unique perfume that maintains harmony. Even the hum of their wings, that low, steady buzz, changes depending on mood. Excited bees buzz differently than calm ones. Angry bees, louder still. It's all part of the same language, a multisensory code written in vibration, smell, movement, and pattern. And here's what's most astonishing. None of it is taught. No bee teaches the waggle dance to another. It's instinctual, passed down not through words, but through DNA. An ancient choreography written into the bee's very bones. Imagine that. Being born with a language already inside you, not a human tongue, but emotion, a knowing, a way to speak without ever speaking. This is the genius of bees. Their language is not about expression, it's about function. It gets things done, it moves the colony, it maps the world. And it does so with an elegance that rivals any poem, because in every waggle, in every buzz, in every scent and step, the bees are saying the same thing. I know where something beautiful is, let me show you. If the waggle dance is a bee's message in motion, then scent is her whisper. A quiet thread of information, drifting through the hive, carried on tiny particles too small to see, but rich with meaning. For bees, scent is not just a signal, it's a language of presence. And in the hive, presence matters. At the centre of this olfactory web is the queen. She moves slowly across the comb, attended by a circle of loyal workers. They feed her, groom her, touch her constantly with their antennae. But what they're really doing is collecting pheromones, special chemical signals that the queen produces from glands in her body. These queen pheromones are more than perfume, they are stability itself. When the queen's scent is strong, the hive is calm. Workers know that she is healthy, laying eggs, and the colony is complete. No need to panic, no need to prepare a new queen. All is well. But when her scent fades, tension rises. It might mean the queen is aging, or sick, or gone. And suddenly, the hive begins to shift. Worker bees start to rear new queens, feeding certain larvae a rich, jelly-like substance to turn them royal. The language of scent becomes a call to action. Because to a bee, absence has a smell. And it's not just the queen who speaks this way. Workers produce their own pheromones, dozens of them, each with its own function. There's the alarm pheromone, released when a bee stings, warning others of danger. It smells like bananas. A single puff can trigger a defensive response from the hive. Too much? The colony will swarm in defense. There's the Nasonov pheromone, used by foragers to mark good food sources or guide lost bees back to the hive. Released from a gland near the tip of the abdomen, it smells lemony, a cheerful scent, a beacon of orientation. Even inside the dark hive, bees navigate by scent trails. A forager returning with nectar will often pass it to a worker via trophallaxis, mouth-to-mouth feeding, and in doing so, transfer not just food, but information. The taste and scent of the nectar tells the receiver where the food came from, how rich it is, and whether it's worth pursuing. This is chemical grammar, a structure of meaning built not on letters, but on molecules. And like all good grammar, it allows subtlety. Bees don't just shout food or danger, they modulate, blend, layer. A scent might say, "Here's a flower I found this morning. It's good but fading. The wind has shifted. Maybe try northeast." No single bee understands the full picture. But together, the colony does. They are a distributed mind, built from scent and instinct, each individual acting on local information, but contributing to a global intelligence. It's like a sentence spoken by 1,000 voices. No one voice says it all, but together, they sing. And like all languages, bee scent is situational. What a pheromone means depends on context. The same scent might calm bees in one situation and arouse aggression in another. It's not just what is said, it's when, where, and by whom. That's the power of chemical communication. It's intimate, it's immediate, and it can't be faked. You can lie with words, you can bluff with gestures, but pheromones don't lie. They are who you are. What you feel, what you want, translated into the air. To live in a hive is to live in a cloud of meaning, a conversation that never stops, a world where the walls are made of wax and scent, and the very air is alive with unspoken truth. Touch, vibration, tremor. In the darkness of the hive, where eyes are almost useless and space is tight, bees turn to yet another layer of language, vibrational communication. A quiet pulsing, like the beating of a drum, you can only feel through your feet. This is the language of purpose, and its grammar is rhythm. Consider the vibration signal, sometimes called the shaking signal. A bee grabs a nestmate with her forelegs and vibrates rapidly, up and down, for 1 to 2 seconds. What does it mean? It depends. In a foraging context, it's a recruitment signal, a way of saying, the flowers are blooming, get moving. It arouses activity. In other contexts, it might urge bees to prepare for swarming, or to tend to brood, or to stay alert. It's not a command, it's a nudge, a pulse of purpose, passed from one bee to another. There's also the stop signal, a brief vibrational buzz, delivered headbutt style to a dancing forager. It says, wait, don't recruit more. That spot is dangerous or depleted. This too is nuance. The waggle dancer says, go. The stopper says, maybe don't. And in the tension between the two, a decision emerges. That's the genius of bee communication. It's not top-down, it's bottom-up. 1,000 microsignals, conflicting and overlapping, each one reflecting a tiny part of reality. And yet somehow it works. It's like trying to play a symphony by having every musician guess what the others are playing, and still producing music that makes sense. How? Because bees don't rely on certainty. They rely on probability. They use feedback loops, reinforcement, trial and error. If one forager dances for a flower patch and others find it good, they'll dance too, amplifying the signal. If it's poor, the dancing dies out. The colony shifts course. It's a self-tuning system, one that depends heavily on these subtle vibrations, signals that move not through air but through comb. The wax structure of the hive isn't just a building, it's an instrument. Every cell, every wall, every floor of honeycomb transmits vibrations. Bees sense these through their legs, which are rich in mechanoreceptors. They feel the pulse of activity, the rumble of recruitment, the tremble of warning. To stand on comb is to stand on a drumhead, and the song it sings is always changing. Some scientists believe the comb even acts as a kind of collective memory, holding patterns of vibration that guide behavior. A message doesn't just move from bee to bee, it echoes through the walls. It's communication not through speech, but through resonance. Imagine living in a house where every floorboard told you what was happening, where you could feel your community's hopes, needs, fears, all through the soles of your feet. That is the bee's world, a place where language is not just something you speak, but something you stand in. At first glance, swarming looks like chaos, a blur of wings, thousands of bees erupting from the hive, filling the air with motion. To the human eye, it's a panic, an escape, a wild, uncontrolled flight. But look closer. This is not chaos. This is dialogue, a colony speaking to itself. Because swarming is one of the most intricate forms of collective decision-making in the natural world. It's how a bee colony reproduces. When the hive becomes too crowded, too full of brood, nectar, and bees, the old queen takes flight, accompanied by thousands of workers, to find a new home. But here's the thing. They don't know where they're going. They just go. They cluster on a branch or tree trunk, forming a living ball around the queen, and wait. And as they wait, something extraordinary unfolds. A conversation in the sky. Scout bees, older foragers with experience and memory, begin to search for potential nesting sites. Hollow trees, cavities in walls, sometimes even mailboxes. Each scout returns and dances a version of the waggle. But now, it's not about flowers, it's about homes. A strong waggle means a good site. Long duration, high intensity, lots of repetition. A weaker dance means a lesser option. Other scouts observe the dance, then fly off to inspect the site themselves. If they agree, they return and perform the same dance. If not, they remain silent. Slowly, through dance and consensus, a decision emerges. There's no leader, no vote, no hierarchy, just amplification of the best option. Eventually, one dance wins out. Enough scouts agree. And then, as if by magic, the entire swarm lifts, all at once, and flies toward the chosen site. How did they all know when to go? More language. Scouts perform a piping signal, a high-frequency vibration that acts like a rallying cry. When enough bees pipe, the swarm begins to warm their flight muscles. The signal builds. Then, at just the right moment, they take off together. It's not unlike a democratic society. Debate, proposal, observation, consensus, all done without words, all done with motion, sound and touch. And what's remarkable is the quality of their decisions. Studies show that bee swarms almost always pick the best available site. Not just adequate, but optimal. Right size, right location, right orientation. All decided by a brain the size of a grain of sand and shared wisdom. Swarming, then, is not just a relocation. It's an act of intelligence, a colony speaking in movement, 1,000 minds choosing as one. It's humbling to watch, because it reminds us that intelligence doesn't have to be centralized. It doesn't need language as we know it. Sometimes, all it takes is trust, feedback, and a rhythm of shared understanding. In the sky, the swarm hums, a single sentence written in wings. Walk into a beehive and you walk into a cathedral of intention. Every cell, every angle, every curve, a structure built not randomly, but with precision, purpose, pattern, and like all languages, the architecture of the hive is part of how bees communicate. Start with the comb. Bees build hexagons, perfect ones, wall to wall, edge to edge, a repeating lattice of 6-sided cells that hold honey, pollen, eggs, and larvae. This pattern is not arbitrary. It is the most efficient use of space and material. The hexagon packs flat, shares walls, and minimizes wax use. But the comb isn't just storage, it's a message board. Where things are placed matters. Honey is stored at the top, pollen just below, brood in the warm center, empty cells at the edges. This arrangement isn't taught, it's inherited. A silent architectural grammar passed down over millions of years. And bees read it fluently. When a nurse bee wants to feed larvae, she knows exactly where to find the right age of brood. When a forager returns, she knows where to deposit nectar. No signs, no labels, just structure as signal. Then there's comb vibration, the way bees use the wax itself to send messages. A tremble here, a buzz there, and suddenly the entire comb becomes a medium for transmission. It's like a language you can live inside. Every wall speaks, every cell holds meaning. Bees even adjust comb construction based on need. If the colony is preparing to swarm, they build larger cells for future queens. The distinctive queen cups, where only one will survive to rule. These cells are not hidden. Their appearance is a signal. It says, change is coming. And all of this without a blueprint, no plans, no architects, just instinct, refined by evolution, guided by vibration and scent. It's a syntax of space. A hive isn't just where bees live, it's how they think, how they plan, how they remember. And in this architecture, you can glimpse a kind of silent intelligence, one that doesn't speak aloud, but builds. We humans often think of language as words, sounds, scripts on a page, but bees remind us language is also place. It's how you organize the world, how you structure the day, how you store memory, how you prepare for a future you can't yet see. So when you see a hive, a real one, pulsing with life and wax and wings, don't just see a nest, see a mind, a place that remembers through shape and speaks through form. It weighs less than a milligram. It has fewer than 1 million neurons, compared to the human brain's 86 billion. And yet, inside that tiny organ lives something remarkable: memory. Not just instinct, not just reflex, but learned behavior. The kind that requires observation, encoding, retrieval, and sometimes even adjustment. A forager bee can remember dozens of flower locations. She knows which ones gave the richest nectar, what time of day they bloom, how long it takes to fly there and back. She creates mental maps, not of streets or coordinates, but of sun angles, landmarks, smells. Scientists call this spatial memory, the ability to form mental representations of environments. Bees do it naturally. They can even recognize patterns, shapes, colors. If you place 2 colored cards next to a sugar source, one blue, one green, and reward one consistently, the bee learns to associate that color with reward. Change the position of the cards, she still picks the right one. That's flexible learning. And it goes further. In experiments, bees have been taught to distinguish between concepts like same versus different, above versus below, and even odd versus even. Ideas we consider abstract. They don't just memorize, they compare. All of this points to one truth. The bee's mind is far richer than it appears. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of bee memory is its connection to communication. Because when a forager returns to the hive and performs her waggle dance, she's not just relaying coordinates. She's sharing experience. She remembers where the food was. She remembers how to get there. And she translates that memory into movement, encoding spatial data into a dance, so that others can read it and learn. That's more than information. That's culture. In a simple form, yes, but still, a behavior passed from one individual to another, not genetically, but socially. Bees even adjust their dances based on conditions. If wind slows their flight, or if the nectar yield changes, the dance adapts. The message updates. This kind of dynamic communication is rare in the animal kingdom, and it all rests on memory. Tiny buzzing creatures with miniature minds, capable of learning, remembering, and teaching. We tend to think of size as a measure of intelligence, but bees remind us intelligence is not in the bulk. It's in the connections. It's in what you remember, what you choose to pass on, what you change in response to the world. So next time you see a bee hovering over a flower, remember, she's not just feeding, she's thinking, and later she'll dance those thoughts into the darkness. The sun is everything to a bee, not just warmth, not just light, but orientation, rhythm, a moving landmark in the sky that acts as a compass, a clock, a calendar, all in one. Bees, you see, are solar navigators. When a forager dances inside the hive, her waggle angle is measured against gravity. Straight up on the vertical comb means toward the sun. A waggle 60 degrees to the left of vertical, that means fly 60 degrees to the left of the sun's position. And it works. Even in darkness, even hours after returning, bees can account for the sun's movement across the sky and adjust their dance accordingly. It's as if they carry a sun model inside their minds, constantly updating, always aligning. This requires a circadian rhythm, an internal clock that tracks time across the day. Bees have it. They know when certain flowers bloom. They remember what time a food source was last rewarding. They'll even stop visiting it if the timing no longer matches. It's not just about location, it's about timing, and it gets more astonishing. Bees can also use polarized light, invisible to us, but visible to them, to navigate on cloudy days. The sky becomes a map of polarization angles, which their compound eyes can detect and interpret. It's like having a secret compass built into your vision. They even use the Earth's magnetic field to orient themselves during long flights. It's believed they have magnetite crystals in their abdomen, allowing them to sense magnetic lines like migratory birds. In other words, bees don't just travel, they calculate. They integrate sunlight, time, landmarks, magnetism, and memory to navigate vast distances relative to their size and return with astonishing precision. Some researchers have compared this to a human navigating a city on foot, using only a watch, the sun, and distant buildings, and still arriving at the exact cafe they visited 2 days ago, without getting lost, without asking for directions, without words. It's a geometry of instinct, and it fuels everything. When the sun rises, foragers wake. When it peaks, they know what flowers are open. When it sets, the hive grows quiet. Their entire day is tied to the arc of that glowing disk in the sky. And when winter comes and the sun retreats, bees huddle close, not in search of light, but in remembrance of it. Even in the coldest months, their internal clocks keep ticking, waiting, listening, preparing for the day when the sun will once again signal, go. That's the power of rhythm, of being attuned to something greater than yourself. Bees don't worship the sun, but they read it, they listen to it, they live by it, and in doing so, they've become masters of time. Not in seconds or hours, but in cycles, in return, in repetition. And in that rhythm, they find meaning, and they dance. It's easy to think of bees as peaceful. They float among flowers, they hum softly in the air, they pollinate, build, dance, and sip nectar. Their world seems gentle, golden and green, swaying in sunlit rhythms. But beneath that calm lies fierce vigilance, because a hive is not just a home, it's a treasure trove, full of honey, brood, wax, and queens in waiting. And like all treasure, it attracts attention. Intruders, thieves, predators. And so bees have evolved not only to gather and grow, but to guard. Their defense begins with scent. Each colony has its own olfactory signature, a unique blend of pheromones that marks who belongs and who doesn't. Guard bees station themselves at the entrance of the hive, constantly sniffing every bee that approaches. If you don't smell right, you're stopped, sometimes challenged, sometimes stung. It's a border checkpoint, silent, chemical, absolute. But sometimes enemies are clever. A wasp might sneak close. A robber bee from another hive might attempt to steal honey. A mammal, like a bear or even a curious human, might disturb the hive's outer wall. And that's when bees speak their loudest warning. The alarm pheromone. Released from a gland near the sting, it spreads through the air like a shout. Other bees pick it up instantly. They become alert, aggressive, ready. One bee stings, then another. And suddenly the entire entrance is a symphony of defense, coordinated not by sight or sound, but by smell and vibration. When threatened, bees will raise their bodies and buzz their wings in a specific frequency, a warning vibration that travels through the comb, a kind of hive-wide tremor of urgency. Others join in. They don't attack blindly, they evaluate. If the threat is small, a beetle, a drifting bee, they might remove it calmly. If it's large, they mobilize with precision. Some races of bees even form heat balls, swarming intruders like wasps and vibrating their wing muscles to raise the temperature until the enemy dies from heat. That's not rage, that's tactical behavior. Learned, coordinated, communicated, and when the threat is over, the alarm scent dissipates. Calm returns, guards resume their post, foragers fly again, as if nothing happened. But in the structure of the hive, in the memory of scent and vibration, the message lingers. We are ready, we are watching. Language doesn't always mean speech. Sometimes it's a stance, a tremor, a collective choice to defend what matters. And bees, for all their softness, are masters of that language. If a hive is a kingdom, then the queen is its heart. But unlike human royalty, she rules not by decree, but by chemistry. Her pheromones, a complex blend of molecules, seep through the hive like a song. They suppress the reproductive urges of worker bees. They stabilize behavior. They signal fertility, health, and continuity. And when she's strong, the hive is strong. But when she weakens, the silence speaks louder than her scent, because even though the queen lays every egg, sometimes over 1,000 a day, she is not eternal. Age, disease, accident, all can silence her song. And when that happens, the workers respond, not in chaos, but in ritual. They choose larvae, usually less than 3 days old, and begin feeding them royal jelly, a protein-rich secretion packed with nutrients. It transforms an ordinary worker larva into a queen. Her ovaries develop, her pheromones shift, her destiny changes. She will become a queen, if she survives, because the hive raises several potential queens at once, each in a special cell, each fed, each protected. But once one emerges, she hunts the others. She stings them through the wax. If two emerge at the same time, they fight. One will win, one will reign. This is natural selection, compressed into inches and hours. The colony does not grieve, it accepts. It is chosen not through emotion, but through scent, timing, and chance. And once the new queen is established, her pheromones begin to flow. The workers attend her, feed her, groom her. Her scent spreads, and once again, the hive is whole. But even in peace, her role is delicate. Too much pheromone, and the hive may resist change. Too little, and the workers may begin to rear replacements again. It's a balance of chemistry, of presence, of trust. And outside the hive, her role shifts once more. In the days after emergence, the young queen flies, not to gather nectar, but to mate. She soars high, several hundred feet into the air, to drone congregation areas, places where male bees from many hives wait. There, in flight, she mates with 10 to 20 drones, storing their sperm in a special organ called the spermatheca. That one flight will fuel all her egg-laying for the rest of her life. She returns, she never mates again, she begins to lay, and so the language of queens is not one of power, but of purpose. She doesn't command, she emits, and the hive listens, or doesn't, because even queens are made by the colony. Even royalty in a hive is conditional, built on pheromones, on timing, on acceptance. It is politics without words, power without orders, a social contract, written not in ink but in scent. And in that silent agreement the hive finds its rhythm again. A queen, a centre, a song in the dark. Each morning as the sun climbs over the trees, a quiet departure begins. One by one, foragers take flight, not in coordinated waves, not in formation, but individually. Each bee, alone, leaving the safety of the hive to enter a world far bigger than herself. And yet, their journeys are not truly solitary, because what they find out there, the flowers, the weather, the wind, will be brought back not just as nectar or pollen, but as knowledge. Every flight is a story waiting to be shared, a message waiting to be danced. To understand this, we must first understand how a forager learns. When a young bee transitions into her foraging role, usually around 3 weeks of age, she begins with orientation flights. These are short, looping arcs near the hive entrance, taken in widening spirals. She's not gathering yet, she's memorizing. The angle of the sun, the shapes of trees, the colours of nearby flowers. She is building a visual map of her surroundings, so that when she flies farther she can return, and when she's ready, she sets off. She might fly 2, even 3 miles, searching, sniffing, exploring. When she finds a promising flower patch, she lands, tests, samples. She doesn't just taste the nectar, she evaluates it. Is it sweet enough? Is the supply steady? Are there competitors? Are the petals open? Is the landing surface stable? Only if the conditions are right does she fill her crop. And then she turns for home. But even on her return, the story isn't over. She may fly a slightly different route back, check for new landmarks, observe how the shadows have shifted. By the time she reaches the hive, she carries two things: nectar in her body and information in her mind. And then comes the dance, that intimate little loop in the darkness, her waggle, her spin, her pause, a message encoded in angle and vibration, translated into flight paths by her sisters. It's not just remarkable, it's poetic. A solitary flight becomes collective action. Her success becomes theirs. And they, in turn, will explore, refine, confirm, contradict, amplify, building a network of movement that shifts each day with the flowers. This is why bees succeed where others might fail. Because no one bee knows everything, but together they know enough. Every flight is a voice, every return is a word, and together they write the story of the meadow, one petal at a time. We tend to think of communication as something that happens between animals. A call, a song, a gesture, but bees communicate with more than each other. They converse with flowers, and flowers in their own quiet way reply. Because evolution is not one-sided. As bees evolved to seek nectar, flowers evolved to speak their language. Start with colour. Bees don't see like we do. Their visual spectrum includes ultraviolet light, invisible to us but radiant to them. Many flowers have evolved UV nectar guides, patterns that look plain to human eyes but glow like runway lights to bees. These guides say, here's where the nectar is. They're not just pretty, they're directional signage. Then there's scent. Flowers produce volatile compounds, sweet, musky, spicy, fruity, that travel through the air to lure pollinators. But they don't release scent constantly. They pulse it, stronger at certain times of day, especially when their nectar levels peak. This makes sense. Bees prefer efficiency. They don't want to visit a flower that's empty, so flowers time their signals, tuning their perfume to the hours when it's most likely to be rewarded. A kind of appointment system, set by scent. Some flowers even change colour after being visited. The petals fade slightly, subtly, a signal that says, already taken, try another. Bees learn to read these cues. They skip spent flowers, prioritise fresh ones. It's not conscious, it's evolved, but it works, because every successful visit, every pollen transfer, is a win for both sides. Bees get food, flowers get fertilised, and the entire meadow becomes a network of mutual signals. Even the electrical field plays a role. Yes, flowers have a natural electric charge. Bees, by flying through the air, build up a positive charge. When they land on a flower, their presence briefly changes its electric field, and bees can sense this. They can detect whether a flower has been recently visited simply by touching it. It's like discovering someone's already read the book you picked up, the cover still warm in your hands. Every touch leaves a trace. Every flower has a voice. It may not hum or speak or wave, but it signals, with light, with smell, with shape, with charge. And the bee, she listens, she decodes, she learns, she adapts. It's a conversation millions of years in the making, and still every day, across every field and garden and forest edge, it continues, unseen, unspoken, but deeply understood. Between bee and bloom, there is no central control, no master switch, no all-knowing bee giving orders from a throne of wax. And yet the hive works. Thousands of individuals, each with their own small brain, their own limited vision, their own tiny slice of awareness, act as one. They build, they forage, they feed, they defend, they raise young, they store food, they regulate temperature. They even change roles with age, shifting from cleaner to nurse to guard to forager in a seamless cycle. How? Collective cognition, or more poetically, the hive mind. This is not metaphor, it's real, and it operates through simple rules, feedback loops, and local information. A single bee doesn't need to know what the whole hive needs. She just follows a few cues. If the brood is hungry, she feeds it. If the wax is warm, she molds it. If she smells fresh nectar, she stores it. If she hears the queen's piping, she attends her. Each behavior is triggered by stimuli: pheromones, vibrations, temperature shifts, odors. No orders, just response. And yet, when you add them all together, thousands of bees making thousands of decisions each second, you get something bigger than the sum of its parts. A superorganism, a living intelligence. What's remarkable is how adaptive this system is. When the hive is low on food, more bees become foragers. When the temperature rises, workers fan their wings to cool it. When a queen dies, they raise a new one. All of this emerges from bottom-up intelligence. Compare this to a school of fish or a flock of birds. The group moves as one because of simple alignment rules, each individual matching the direction and distance of its neighbours. But bees go further. They not only align behaviour, they allocate tasks, shift roles, build infrastructure, store seasonal resources, debate options, reach consensus. And they do it without memory of the whole. There is no bee that understands the entire hive, but the hive understands itself. This is why scientists study bees when trying to build distributed systems like smart power grids, self-organizing robots, or decentralized algorithms. Because bees show us that you don't need a top-down hierarchy to build complexity. You just need communication and trust. Each bee trusts that her action matters, that what she senses is real, that her small part contributes to the whole. And in that trust, a mind is formed, not in a skull, but in a swarm. Not thinking about itself, but as itself. A thought that builds wax walls and dances directions into the dark. A thought that hums. In summer, the hive buzzes with activity. Foragers zip in and out. Workers tend to brood. The air is thick with pheromones and motion. But in winter, everything changes. The flowers vanish. The sun grows weak. The hive becomes a fortress of stillness. And yet even here, in the coldest, quietest months, the language of bees continues. It's just spoken differently. No dances, no flights, no foraging missions, just heat and hush. Because survival in winter is about conservation, of warmth, of energy, of motion. The bees cluster together in a tight ball, surrounding the queen at the centre. The outer bees act as insulation. The inner ones vibrate their wing muscles, not to fly, but to generate heat. They rotate positions, taking turns in the cold and the warmth. This rotation has no leader. No one assigns shifts. It happens automatically, based on need and feeling and proximity. Even in stillness, the hive coordinates. It also listens. Bees can detect the gradual return of warmth. They sense subtle changes in daylight, filtering into the hive. They know, long before we do, when spring is coming. And slowly, quietly, they begin to stir. A few begin cleaning out the hive, removing debris. A few begin feeding on stored honey. A few begin talking again, emitting soft pheromones that signal activity. Eventually, one day, the first forager will fly. Tentatively, carefully. She'll check the sun, the air, the scents on the breeze. And if the signals are right, others will follow. Winter is not absence, it's pause. It's a different tempo of communication. A language without movement. A message carried in the whisper of wings, held still. Because silence, too, is a sentence. And the hive speaks it with grace, not as death, but as waiting. A breath held in the cold, until flowers return, until light grows long, until it is time to dance again. They are born with potential, and the hive decides how that potential unfolds. Not through commands, not through training, but through timing, environment, and chemical cues. Each worker bee, genetically identical to her sisters, begins life with a single task: cleaning. As soon as she emerges from her cell, she turns around and begins to clean it, preparing it for the next egg. She works in darkness, with no understanding of the hive's size or purpose, just instinct. But after a few days, something shifts. New hormones, new smells, new signals, and suddenly she becomes a nurse, feeding larvae with royal jelly, pollen, and honey. She tends to the brood constantly, touching them with her antennae, monitoring their growth. Then another shift. She becomes a builder, secreting wax from special glands and constructing comb. Later still, she'll become a guard, patrolling the hive entrance and checking every returning bee for the correct scent. Finally, after about 3 weeks, she becomes a forager. Only then does she leave the hive. Only then does she meet the sun. This progression of roles is not linear, not absolute. It can speed up, slow down, or reverse, depending on the needs of the colony. If many foragers die from weather, pesticides, or predators, younger bees will mature faster to take their place. If the brood needs more attention, older bees may return to nursing duties. This is called temporal polyethism, a fancy term for division of labour by age. But it's not rigid. It's fluid, responsive. Bees don't ask, "What do I want to be?" They ask, "What does the hive need me to be?" And the answers come not in orders, but in pheromones. Brood pheromones, queen pheromones, pheromones from other workers, each one a chemical whisper that nudges a bee toward a role. Even the tasks themselves change the bee. A nurse bee's brain is tuned to detect larval needs. A forager's brain has better spatial memory. When a bee changes roles, her brain rewires. She becomes what she does. Think about that. Her identity isn't fixed, it's emergent. Her body shifts, her brain reshapes, her very perception of the world transforms, not because she chooses, but because she listens to the hive, to the signals, to the silent language of need. There's no promotion, no pride, just purpose, and in that purpose a kind of grace. Bees live short lives. A summer worker might live just 6 weeks. A forager, once she begins flying, may last only a few days. Her wings tattered from miles of flight, her body worn thin. And when she dies, it is quiet. No ceremony, no mourning, just a stillness. But even in death she leaves a mark. Another bee will carry her from the hive and drop her gently outside, a ritual of removal to protect the brood from disease. No one says goodbye, but still her presence lingers, in the comb she built, in the nectar she stored, in the dances she performed, whose patterns live on in other bees' memories. Because bees don't leave behind names, they leave behind movement, and that movement echoes. It's strange, isn't it, to think that a creature with no concept of legacy can leave one so clearly. That a bee's final act might be a dance that tells others where the best flowers bloom, even after she's gone. And sometimes death itself becomes a message. If a forager doesn't return, the hive notes her absence. If enough don't return, the recruitment dances shift. The hive adjusts. Perhaps a new patch of flowers is sought. Perhaps the field is left alone. Loss is not ignored, it's absorbed, adapted to, transformed into new decisions. In this way, bee communication has memory. Not individual memory, but collective, like the rings in a tree or the layers in an ancient city. The hive remembers what happened, not through thoughts, but through changed behaviour. There's no grief as we understand it, but there is continuity. There is a kind of passing on, and that perhaps is the most enduring form of communication. Not what we say in life, but what others continue because of us. Bees show us that language doesn't have to be spoken to matter. It can be built into walls, baked into wax, sung into dances. It can live on long after the body is still. A hum in the dark, a flower visited again, a story whispered in wings. Truth in the world of bees seems sacred. Every waggle, every scent, every signal serves the colony's survival. Bees communicate for the collective good, sharing food sources, alerting to danger, coordinating growth. There is no room for ego, no time for games. And yet, even in the hive, deception exists. It's rare, but it's real. And it starts with the dance. Occasionally, a forager will exaggerate her waggle. The distance to a flower patch might be slightly misrepresented. The direction might shift. The enthusiasm, the number of repetitions, might not match the actual quality of the nectar. Why? Not malice, not pride, but error. A forager might dance excitedly for a food source that has since been depleted, or perhaps she misjudged its richness. Or perhaps, and this is where it gets strange, she lies on purpose. Yes, some scientists believe bees are capable of competitive deception. In hives with multiple scouts dancing for different nest sites during swarming, a scout might promote a less optimal site more vigorously. Why? To boost the chances of her preferred location winning the consensus. It's not proof of intention, but it suggests strategy. And that's where things become deeply fascinating. Because deception, in any species, only evolves when truth is the norm. If everyone lies, no one listens. But if almost everyone tells the truth, a well-timed lie can shift outcomes. In this way, bee communication mirrors our own. Not in content, but in complexity. Most of the time, their signals are honest. The dances are accurate. The pheromones are sincere. But sometimes, whether by design or by accident, errors propagate. And the hive must respond. That's the safeguard. Bees verify. They don't blindly follow every dance. Observing foragers check the site. If it doesn't match the message, they don't repeat the dance. They withhold amplification. The lie dies quietly. The system protects itself through redundancy. Multiple scouts, multiple observations, distributed decision-making. It's not perfect, but it's robust. Deception never dominates because the system isn't built on blind trust. It's built on trial. And that's the lesson. Even in the most elegant languages, truth must be tested. Even among creatures without speech, there is a kind of discernment, a weighing of signal against experience, a wisdom not of individuals, but of the group. And that too is a language, the language of learning. To us, a bee's buzz is background noise, a faint whir in the garden, a sound we associate with summer, sweetness, or sometimes caution. But for bees, that buzz is not just a byproduct of flight. It's a tool, a signal. Sometimes even a message. Let's start with the basics. A bee's buzz comes from the rapid movement of her wings, not just for flying, but also for thermoregulation and vibration. When she flaps her wings, she creates a sound in the range of 200 to 250 Hz, low and steady. But that frequency isn't fixed. Bees can modulate it, raise it, lower it, pulse it, and these changes carry meaning. For instance, when bees pollinate certain flowers, like tomatoes, blueberries, or peppers, they use a behavior called buzz pollination. They grab the flower and vibrate their flight muscles rapidly, without flying, creating a burst of sonic energy. The result? Pollen explosion. The flower's anthers release their pollen in a cloud, more efficiently than if the bee had simply brushed against them. Different plants require different buzz frequencies, and bees adjust accordingly. It's not conscious, it's evolved, but it's effective, and it shows that bees understand resonance, even if they don't know the word. Buzzing isn't just for flowers. Inside the hive, bees use sound to communicate state. A bee preparing to sting might buzz more sharply, a warning to others, and perhaps to you. A queen bee makes a distinct piping sound, a high-pitched pulse that signals her presence. It's often heard before or after she emerges from her cell, and it can trigger rival queens to respond with their own pipes, a kind of royal duel at a distance. Sometimes, these piping sounds escalate into vibration duels, signalling which queen is stronger or more likely to take power. Even worker bees produce different buzzes depending on their mood and task. Calm bees buzz differently from stressed bees. Hungry bees differently from well-fed ones. It's not a language in the way we speak, but it is coded, correlated, and interpreted by others. Scientists are beginning to map these sounds. With sensitive microphones and AI analysis, they can now detect subtle shifts in buzz patterns that reveal the health of a colony. Whether the queen is present, whether workers are agitated, whether foragers are succeeding. One day, we may have acoustic monitors in hives that listen like doctors, diagnosing problems through sound alone. Because bees are always speaking, even when we're not listening, even when the air seems still. There is a message in every vibration. Every hum has a heartbeat behind it, a rhythm, a signal, a pulse of meaning, passed from thorax to air, from bee to bee, from world to world. We just have to learn to hear it. For thousands of years, humans have watched bees. We've watched them gather pollen, build hives, sting intruders. We've seen their dances, tasted their honey, marveled at their order. And in all that time, something strange and beautiful has happened. We started to see ourselves in them. From ancient myths to modern science, bees have become a mirror, a metaphor, a mystery we keep trying to understand. The ancient Greeks believed bees were messengers of the gods. In some myths, they whispered secrets to the oracle at Delphi. In others, they symbolized the soul, a fluttering spark that leaves the body in death. In Egyptian mythology, bees were born from the tears of Ra, the sun god. They were sacred, radiant, eternal. The Celts believed in a bee line, a spiritual pathway between this world and the next, guided by the hum of bees. Even today, in some rural traditions, beekeepers tell the bees when someone dies. They walk to the hive and whisper news of a passing, as if the colony too deserves to know, as if grief should be shared, even across species. But it's not just myth. Philosophers and scientists have long admired the social structure of bees. Aristotle wrote of their dances, their order, their roles. Charles Butler, in the 1600s, called the hive a monarchy and wrote music to imitate its buzz. Carl von Frisch, in the 20th century, finally decoded the waggle dance, proving that bees communicate in space and time. And with each step, we've seen a little more. Not just of them, but of us. Because bees are order without tyranny, community without ego, intelligence without complexity. They live in cooperation. They sacrifice for the whole. They speak without words. And maybe that's what draws us to them. The idea that meaning doesn't have to be shouted to be real. That order can arise from listening. That a world built on shared signals, small actions, and quiet feedback can work. In the age of noise, bees remind us. Language can be soft, leadership can be silent, life can be meaningful, even without names. So we keep watching. We paint bees on cave walls, we inscribe them on coins. We wear them as symbols of sweetness and sting, of labour and loyalty. Not because we've solved them, but because we recognise something ancient, something true. A hum inside us. That sounds just like theirs. We know bees think. They remember. They learn. They dance, adjust, deceive and decide. But do they dream? Do they have inner lives? Do they feel? This question, once laughed off, now sits at the edge of science, unsettling, urgent, and maybe unanswerable. Let's start with what we know. When bees sleep, and yes, they do sleep, their antennae droop. Their response to stimuli slows. Their body rests. Forager bees often sleep more than younger hive bees, especially after long flights. During sleep, bees exhibit oscillations in brain activity, bursts of neural patterns, not unlike those seen in dreaming mammals. Does this mean they dream? Not necessarily, but it suggests internal processing, a sorting of memory, a reshaping of learned routes and dances. Some scientists have even shown that sleep-deprived bees dance less accurately, as if rest is needed not just for energy, but for cognitive clarity. So perhaps a bee, at rest in the hive, replaying a flight in her tiny mind, is doing something like what we do. Not with stories, but with space. Not with characters, but with curves of sun and petals of scent. What would a bee dream of? A faster route to a flower, the taste of yesterday's nectar, a misstep corrected in imagination before it is retried. We don't know. We may never know. But the idea that even in this small body, something stirs beyond reflex is powerful. And here's another strange fact. When a bee dies in REM sleep, a stage of deep rest, her last recorded brain activity resembles that of memory consolidation. It's as if her mind is holding something, even in the final moment. This doesn't prove consciousness, but it complicates our neat hierarchies. It reminds us that intelligence is not binary. It is not yes or no, smart or dumb. It is layered, distributed, contextual. A bee is not a person, but she is not nothing. She sees, chooses, remembers, learns, and maybe, just maybe, imagines. And what is language, if not the expression of internal states? If a bee can modify her message based on memory, if she can adjust her signals to account for wind, time, and scent, then maybe we must admit that there is a spark inside her, tiny, unspoken, but real. A glint of thought behind the buzz, and maybe that's enough, not to make her human, but to make her wondrous. We often assume that one species speaks one language, a universal dance, a single hum, a shared code. But bees, like humans, are more complicated than that. They don't just communicate, they communicate differently, from hive to hive. Yes, bees have dialects. This discovery surprised even the researchers who first found it. Studying colonies in different regions, they noticed subtle variations in waggle dances. One colony's foragers waggled faster than others. Another danced with a steeper angle for the same direction. Still another extended the waggle duration for a shorter distance. These weren't errors, they were patterns, regional styles, local habits, a kind of bee accent. When scientists took a bee from one hive and placed her in another, she could still dance, but the other bees didn't always follow her directions correctly. Her dialect didn't match theirs. Over time, she might adjust, or the hive might learn to interpret her version. But the difference was real, and it raises deep questions. How does a dialect emerge in bees? Is it genetic, environmental, cultural? Do bees imitate each other? Does a young forager learn by watching more experienced dancers? Some evidence suggests yes. In colonies with limited genetic variation, like those started from a single queen, dialects seem to arise socially, meaning bees may not just inherit their communication style, they may learn it. And if that's true, then bee language isn't fixed. It's evolving, constantly, quietly, locally. This matters, because it means that bee colonies have something like culture, not art, not myth, but learned behaviour that varies by group. And culture, even in its smallest form, is precious. It suggests that bees don't just pass on DNA. They pass on ways of being, and that, in turn, suggests something even deeper, that every hive is a little different, that the language of bees is not one tongue, but many voices, and each hum carries not just meaning, but origin, a place, a rhythm, a home. Imagine flying through a forest at 20 kilometers per hour. Imagine navigating by sun angle, colour patterns, wind shifts, and smell. Now imagine returning not just to the right tree or the right meadow, but to one single hole in a wall of thousands. That's what a bee does, every day. And she does it using one of the most underappreciated tools in nature, olfaction, smell. To us, the world of scent is faint, background, fleeting. To bees, it is structure. They can detect scents in parts per trillion. They can remember dozens, even hundreds, of floral odours. They can associate smell with reward, distance, even danger, and they use it to find their way home. Every hive has a unique smell, a blend of wax, brood pheromones, queen scent, and the specific flora nearby. For a bee, this scent is a beacon. When she returns from a flight, even if disoriented, she can sniff her way back to the entrance. She may make loops, she may hover, but as the scent sharpens, she locks in and lands right where she belongs. But scent doesn't just guide her to the hive, it marks everything. Bees leave tiny droplets of scent from their Nasonov gland to mark key locations: the hive entrance, a rich flower patch, a swarm cluster. It's a kind of invisible ink, readable only by bees. In fact, when a swarm clusters on a branch, scout bees fan their wings and release Nasonov pheromones to signal the exact spot for others to land. They're saying, here is the place. Even inside the hive, scent divides space. Nurses smell the age of the larvae. Guards smell who belongs and who doesn't. Foragers smell where to drop nectar. Smell is location, identity, status, and story, and it persists in memory. A bee who visits a flower will remember its scent long after she's left. She'll recognize it again, even amid thousands of competing signals. She may even choose that flower again, based on her past success. That's not just reflex, that's preference. And preference, when it spreads across a colony, becomes strategy. So next time you walk past a flowering bush and see a bee hovering mid-air, seemingly doing nothing, know that she might be sniffing the air. Not just for food, but for home, for her hive's unique perfume, for the scent that says, you are not lost. Because even in a world of chaos, bees carry a compass made not of metal, but of memory and smell. It begins with a hush. The queen grows restless. The hive becomes crowded. Too much brood, too much heat, too many bodies pulsing with activity. And then the bees begin preparing special cells, longer, waxier, cradle-like. Queen cells, because the old queen will soon leave, and she won't go alone. She'll take half the colony with her, workers, scouts, attendants, and begin a new chapter. This is swarming. It looks chaotic. A tornado of bees, a living cloud spiraling around tree branches, or rooftops, or fence posts. But it is anything but chaos. It is deliberate, coordinated, and above all, communicative. Swarming is one of the most stunning examples of collective decision-making in the animal kingdom. Here's how it works. After leaving the old hive, the swarm clusters temporarily, on a branch, perhaps, or a post. They form a dense ball around the queen to protect her. Now they must find a new home. Scouts fly out in all directions, searching for suitable cavities, tree hollows, rock crevices, even wall spaces. Each scout evaluates her site and returns to the cluster. And she dances, not to flowers this time, but to home. She performs a waggle dance on the surface of the swarm cluster, just like she would for food. The better the site, the more vigorously she dances. Other scouts observe. Some visit the site she danced for. If they agree, they return and perform the same dance. The swarm becomes a debate floor. Dozens of bees dancing for different sites, each trying to recruit support. Over time, one site gains more and more votes, more dancers. The swarm reaches consensus, no shouting, no leaders, just signal strength and shared validation. When enough bees agree, they begin to buzz in a new way. A piping signal. This tells the others, it's time. Suddenly the swarm takes flight. Thousands of bees all in motion, following a shared memory of a place none of them have lived in yet. They arrive, they enter, they begin to build, and a new hive is born. This entire process, scouting, dancing, choosing, is language in its purest form, information gathered, evaluated collectively, translated into action, and all without a single command. If that's not thinking, then what is? Bees swarm not because of chaos, but because of consensus. And the consensus is built, as always, through dance, vibration, scent, and trust. Bees don't just talk to each other, they speak to flowers. We've touched on this, how UV patterns guide bees, how scent pulses signal nectar, how colours fade after pollination. But what we haven't fully explored is this, that every act of pollination is a dialogue, not just biology, not just exchange, but communication between two species with interlocking purposes. Let's break it down. A flower doesn't want to be pollinated, but evolution favours those that attract pollinators. Over millions of years, flowers have developed specialised traits to speak to bees: bright colours, sweet smells, landing platforms, shapes that fit bee bodies, nectar guides invisible to us, but glowing in UV to a bee's eye. Bees, in turn, have evolved to read those traits. Their bodies are fuzzy, ideal for picking up pollen. Their eyes detect UV. Their brains remember which flowers are rewarding. They can even recognize individual flower species by smell and shape, and prioritize the most efficient routes, visiting the same type over and over. This is called floral constancy. It benefits both bee and plant. The bee gets efficient foraging. The plant gets reliable cross-pollination. It's a silent contract formed by co-evolution, and sometimes it gets incredibly specific. Some orchids mimic female bees in shape, colour, even scent, tricking male bees into mating with them and transferring pollen in the process. It's a lie, but the bee responds because the message fits his perceptual world. Even mistakes can be read. This deep mutualism means that bees and flowers don't just coexist, they've shaped each other's language. A flower blooms when bees are active. A bee seeks what flowers offer, and between them is a dance not of legs and wings, but of signals. So next time you see a bee land on a blossom, consider that is not a moment of mere feeding. It is an exchange of information, a conversation between life forms that don't speak, but that still listen. We wear watches, we set alarms, we track time in numbers and schedules and digital reminders. But bees, they sense time without any of that. They don't just act when the sun rises. They remember when the best flowers bloom, even if that time is hours away. A bee trained to a feeder at 9 o'clock a.m. will begin showing up just before 9 o'clock every day, even if the feeder is gone. They understand time of day, not with precision, not with seconds ticking by, but with a deep internal rhythm tied to light, temperature, and perhaps, most intriguingly, circadian biology. Like us, bees have circadian clocks, internal systems that regulate sleep, activity, and hormonal shifts. These clocks help them organize behavior around a 24-hour cycle, coordinating everything from foraging to hive maintenance. But here's where things get even more impressive. Bees don't just keep time, they combine it with space. When a forager returns to the hive and performs a waggle dance, the angle of her dance correlates to the position of the sun, even as it moves across the sky. And yet, the bee's dance remains accurate, accounting for that movement. This means she doesn't just remember where the flower is. She remembers where the sun will be when another bee sets out to follow her directions. She's adjusting her message in real time, or rather, in future time. That's not just spatial memory, that's mental projection. It's the same kind of temporal spatial reasoning humans use when we say things like, take a left after the gas station. It'll be on your right around 3 p.m. But the bee does it through angles and duration, scent and sunlight. No words, no symbols, just time, felt in her wings, remembered in her dance. And time, in the hive, is everything. Nurses feed larvae on a precise developmental schedule. Guards shift positions as night falls. Builders secrete wax when the temperature peaks. Even the hive's collective circadian rhythm pulses through its structure, a kind of hive-wide heartbeat synced to the outside world. Some researchers believe that bees can even track time intervals. That is, if you give a bee a reward every 10 minutes, she'll start to anticipate it, arriving just before the next drop. That kind of timing isn't instinct, it's learning, a sense of when. And that, in a creature the size of a grain of rice, is breathtaking. Because to sense time is to sense change, to plan, to remember, to expect. It's another kind of language, really. Not of sound, but of duration. And the bee, once again, speaks it fluently. In the symphony of the hive, every bee plays a part. But what happens when the music stops? In recent years, beekeepers around the world began opening hives only to find salt emptiness. The honey still there, the queen still alive, the brood still waiting. But the workers? Gone, vanished. This is colony collapse disorder, a haunting phrase for a haunting phenomenon, where the language of the hive abruptly, mysteriously ceases. No buzzing, no dancing, no exchange of food or pheromones. Just silence. Scientists have worked tirelessly to understand the causes. It's not just one thing, it's a convergence of threats. Pesticides, especially neonicotinoids, that disrupt neural signaling and memory. Parasites like the varroa mite that weaken immune systems and spread viruses. Monoculture farming, which reduces the diversity and timing of floral resources. Climate change, which shifts blooming periods and stresses colonies through heat waves or unpredictable seasons. And perhaps most critically, disruption of communication. When a forager is exposed to pesticides, her ability to navigate may be impaired. She can't return to the hive, or if she does, she can't perform her dance properly. She can't teach, she can't speak. And one silent bee becomes 2, then 10, then 1,000, until the hive becomes a room full of listeners with no voice left to follow. That's the true tragedy of colony collapse. It's not just about numbers. It's about a system of language breaking down, a society losing its narrative thread. And yet even in this darkness, there is hope. Awareness has grown. Many countries have begun to restrict harmful pesticides. Farmers are planting more wildflowers. Urban beekeeping is rising, bringing hives back into cityscapes. Technology is helping too, with acoustic sensors that monitor hive sounds, thermal imaging to track colony health, even AI models that predict collapse before it happens. And perhaps most powerfully, people are listening. For the first time in a long while, the hum of bees has become a subject of global attention. Their silence has become a warning. And we're hearing it. Perhaps if we learn their language fast enough, if we act on what they've always told us, we can restore the balance. Because when bees go quiet, it's not just their world that dims, it's ours. They are not just pollinators, they are communicators, messengers from the natural world, and if we lose them, we lose the language of the meadow, the pulse of the garden, the heartbeat of the seasons. Let's not let that happen. Let's learn to listen before it's too late. What does the future hold for bees, for their hives, for their language? For years, we've looked at bees through the lens of agriculture, as pollinators, honeymakers, farm helpers, and they are all those things. But now, something else is happening. Scientists, engineers, ecologists, and artists are beginning to look at bees through a new lens, as communicators and as teachers. In labs around the world, researchers are using bee behavior to inspire the next generation of technology. They're studying how swarms make decisions to improve AI systems, letting machines learn like bees do, through feedback, not force. Robotics engineers are building swarm drones that mimic the way bees share information and divide tasks. No central control, just local rules and shared awareness, a robotic hive mind. Some ecologists are designing smart hives equipped with sensors that detect temperature, humidity, buzz frequency, pheromone levels, all to listen better, in real time, to the health of a colony. Others are experimenting with bioacoustic translation, trying to decode specific bee sounds and match them to known meanings. Not just this is a stress buzz, but this is a warning about heat, or this is a call for water. We are, in essence, building a dictionary of bees, slowly, carefully, and not to exploit, but to collaborate. The idea isn't to turn bees into tools or pets or employees. It's to respect their intelligence, their subtlety, their communication, to let them teach us about distributed decision-making, non-verbal language, and the balance between individual and collective wisdom. And yes, there are dreams beyond the lab. What if cities were designed with bee corridors, green pathways planted specifically to support their foraging patterns? What if architecture responded to bees, using scent cues to protect hives from predators? What if we taught children not just to fear stings, but to read bee dances as a form of movement poetry? What if a future existed where bees were not just preserved, but understood as partners, as models, as fellow travellers? It's not so far-fetched. We've built entire civilizations around less. And bees? They've been building theirs longer than we have. Their society has endured for 100 million years. Perhaps the best future is one where we let them continue. And listen, and learn, and maybe even dance a little. As we near the end of our journey into the world of bees, one truth keeps buzzing in our minds. Bees speak, not in syllables, not in scripts, but in vibrations, scents, dances, angles, memories, and time. They speak in a language older than writing, older than fire, older than us. Their words are wings brushing against petals. Their sentences are made of sunlight angles and trembling wax. Their poetry is a waggle on the comb floor, telling of clover fields and lavender skies. And yet, we almost didn't notice. We almost missed it. For centuries we saw only the sting, the honey, the hive as metaphor. But language? We assumed that was ours alone. And in doing so, we silenced millions of voices around us. Not just bees, but trees, fungi, waves, whales. We forgot that language doesn't need an alphabet to exist. It only needs pattern and response, call and answer, signal and reception. And in that sense, bees have always been speaking. To flowers, to seasons, to each other, to us. We were just too busy talking to hear, but now we're beginning to listen, to watch a bee land on a bloom, and understand that this is not just foraging. It's a conversation. To see a dance ripple through the hive and know it carries direction, distance, passion, urgency. To hear a buzz and recognize emotion, stress, hunger, alertness, anticipation. And to look at the silence of a winter hive, not as death, but as stillness filled with listening. Because that too is language, the pauses, the space between, the quiet waiting for spring. And if there's one thing bees teach us above all else, it's this. Language is not about speaking, it's about connecting. The waggle that sends sisters to the right flower, the scent that guards the hive entrance, the hum that signals readiness, the pattern that binds a swarm. It all adds up to life, to survival, to meaning. So the next time you see a bee hovering, dancing, humming, remember, she is not simple, she is not silent. She is telling the world something. And if we learn to listen, we might just remember how to speak with wonder again. We came here to learn about bees, but somewhere along the way, we started learning about ourselves. Because the language of bees isn't just fascinating, it's instructive. It holds mirrors up to our own behaviours, our cities, our systems, our ways of being. And in those mirrors, we see choices. We see how we might live differently. Let's begin with the hive itself. Bees live collectively, not in competition, but in coordination. Every bee contributes, every bee listens, every bee adjusts her task based on what the hive needs. Not out of obligation, but because she's wired to care. We could build systems like that. We could create communities where individuals aren't told what to do, but trusted to do what's right based on local signals, empathy, awareness, feedback. We could design workplaces like hives, responsive, decentralized, self-organizing. We could design cities that hum, with food at the center, with homes that breathe, with green corridors that buzz with pollinators and people. From bees, we learn the power of nonverbal communication, how tone and presence and rhythm matter as much as words. From bees, we learn that tiny actions add up. A drop of nectar, a piece of wax, a single wing beat contributing to something vast. From bees, we learn that you don't need to understand the whole to make the whole work. And maybe most profoundly, from bees, we learn that language is more than speech. It's how we move, how we signal safety, how we respond to need, how we remember and adjust and build together. We may not dance in figure eights on comb floors, but we do perform our own waggles. A text sent at the right time, a look across a room, a shared silence that says, "I see you." Bees remind us that communication is a living thing, that it grows, adapts, evolves. And if we treat it with care, if we listen as much as we speak, then maybe we can build a world that thrives like theirs. Not perfect, not eternal, but beautiful, cooperative, resilient, a hum beneath the noise, a pattern behind the chaos, a dance that keeps going. And so here we are. The night has deepened, the questions have been asked, the flowers have closed, the hive somewhere in the dark is silent now. Not with absence, but with rest. And maybe you are resting too. Maybe you're curled beneath a blanket, still hearing echoes of waggle dances in your thoughts, still imagining bees navigating sun angles and wind currents, tasting the memory of lavender on their tongues. Maybe, like them, you are dreaming, not of words, but of signals, of patterns, of something ancient and tiny and shimmering with purpose. That's the thing about bees. They stay with you, not just as insects, but as ideas, as metaphors, as messengers. They remind you that the world is always speaking, even when it seems quiet. That intelligence isn't always loud. That meaning can be made without sentences, and that the smallest creatures may carry the oldest wisdoms. The bees will rise with the sun tomorrow. They'll fan their wings, they'll clean cells, they'll sniff the wind, they'll talk in hums and vibrations and pheromone trails. And the flowers will respond, and the hive will stir, and the language, the one we've spent this long night trying to understand, will continue. Not in books, not in recordings, but in flight, in the tremble of wax beneath tiny feet, in the way one body leans into another, in the way a message is passed from dancer to observer to follower to field. And maybe, if we're lucky, we'll carry some of that language with us, into our own lives, into the way we listen, the way we respond, the way we build. So sleep now, curious mind. Let the hum of the hive linger just behind your dreams. You've listened well, and the bees, in their secret silent way, are dancing for you.